always aroused a feeling of impatience. "In case I don't, may I ask you to say good by to him for me and to accept the expression of my regret?" "And I, too, ask," began Nikolai Petrovich with a bow. But Bazarov did not wait for him to finish his sentence and went out of the room. On hearing that Bazarov was going, Pavel Petrovich expressed a desire to see him, and shook him by the hand. But even then Bazarov remained as cold as ice. He realized that Pavel Petrovich wanted to display magnanimity. He found no opportunity of saying good by to Fenichka; he only exchanged glances with her from the window. Her face struck him by its sad look. "She'll come to grief probably," he said to himself, "though she may pull through somehow." Pyotr, however, was so overcome that he wept on his shoulder, until Bazarov cooled him down by asking if he had a constant water supply in his eyes. And Dunyasha felt obliged to run away into the plantation to hide her emotion. The originator of all this distress climbed into a country cart, lit a cigar, and when, 3 miles further on at a bend in the road, he saw for the last time the Kirsanovs' farmstead and its new manor house standing together on the sky line, he merely spat and muttering, "Damned nobleman," wrapped himself more tightly in his cloak. Pavel Petrovich was soon better, but he had to lie in bed for about a week. He bore his captivity, as he called it, fairly patiently, though he took great trouble over his toilet and had everything scented with eau de cologne. Nikolai Petrovich read papers to him; Fenichka waited on him as before, brought him soup, lemonade, boiled eggs and tea; but a secret dread seized her every time she came into his room. Pavel Petrovich's unexpected action had alarmed everyone in the house, and her most of all. Prakovich was the only person not troubled by it, and he discoursed on how gentlemen used to fight in his day only with real gentlemen, but such low scoundrels they would have ordered to be horsewhipped in the stables for their insolence. Fenichka's conscience scarcely reproached her, but she was tormented at times by the thought of the real cause of the quarrel; and Pavel Petrovich, too, looked at her so strangely, so that even when her back was turned she felt his eyes fixed on her. She grew thinner from constant inward agitation, and, as it happened, became still more charming. One day the incident took place in the early morning Pavel Petrovich felt better and moved from his bed to the sofa, while Nikolai Petrovich, having previously made inquiries about his brother's health, went off to the threshing floor. Fenichka brought him a cup of tea, and setting it down on a little table was about to withdraw. Pavel Petrovich detained her. "Where are you going in such a hurry, Fedosya Nikolayevna?" he began. "Are you so busy?" "No. Yes, I have to pour out tea." "Dunyasha will do that without you. Sit down for a little while with an invalid. By the way, I must have a talk with you." Fenichka sat down on the edge of an armchair without speaking. "Listen," said Pavel Petrovich, pulling at his mustache. "I have wanted to ask you for a long time. You seem somehow afraid of me." "I?" "Yes, you. You never look at me in the face, as if your conscience were not clear." Fenichka blushed, but looked up at Pavel Petrovich. He seemed so strange to her, and her heart began quietly throbbing. "Surely you have a clear conscience?" he asked her. "Why should it not be clear?" she whispered. "Why, indeed? Besides, whom could you have wronged? Me? That is unlikely. Any other people living in the house? That is also a fantastic idea. Could it be my brother? But surely you love him? I love him." "With your whole soul, with your whole heart?" "I love Nikolai Petrovich with my whole heart." "Truly? Look at me, Fenichka." He called her by that name for the first time. "You know, it is a great sin to tell lies." "I am not lying, Pavel Petrovich. If I did not love Nikolai Petrovich, there would be no point in my living any longer." "And you will never give him up for anyone else?" "For whom else could I give him up?" "For whom indeed. Well, what about that gentleman who has just gone away from here?" Fenichka got up. "My God, Pavel Petrovich, why are you torturing me? What have I done to you? How can you say such things?" "Fenichka," said Pavel Petrovich in a sad voice, "you know I saw." "What did you see?" "Well, there, in the summer house." Fenichka blushed to the roots of her hair and to her ears. "How can I be blamed for that?" she pronounced with an effort. Pavel Petrovich raised himself up. "You were not to blame? No, not at all?" "I love Nikolai Petrovich and no one else in the world, and I shall always love him," cried Fenichka with sudden force, while sobs rose in her throat. "As for what you saw, I will say in the dreadful day of last judgment that I am innocent of any blame for it and always was, and I would rather die at once if people can suspect me of any such thing against my benefactor, Nikolai Petrovich." But here her voice failed, and at the same moment she felt that Pavel Petrovich was seizing and pressing her hand. She looked at him and was almost petrified. He had turned even paler than before; his eyes were shining, and, most surprising of all, one large solitary tear was rolling down his cheek. "Fenichka," he said in a strange whisper, "love him, love my brother. He is such a good, kind man. Don't give him up for anyone, and don't listen to anyone else's talk. Only think, what can be more terrible than to love and not to be loved in return? Never leave my poor Nikolai." Fenichka's eyes were dry and her fright had vanished, so great was her amazement. But what were her feelings when Pavel Petrovich of all people, pressed her hand to his lips and seemed to pierce into it without kissing it, only breathing convulsively from time to time. "Good heavens," she thought, "is he suffering from some attack?" At that moment his whole ruined life stirred within him. The staircase creaked under rapidly approaching footsteps. He pushed her away from him and let his head drop back on the pillow. The door opened, and Nikolai Petrovich came in, looking cheerful, fresh and ruddy. Mitya, just as fresh and rosy as his father, with nothing but his little shirt on, was frisking about in his arms, snatching with bare little toes at the buttons of his rough country coat. Fenichka simply flung herself upon him, and clasping him and her son together in her arms, dropped her head on his shoulder. Nikolai Petrovich was astonished. Fenichka, so shy and modest, never demonstrated her feelings for him in front of a third person. "What's the matter?" he said, and glancing at his brother he handed Mitya to her. "You don't feel worse?" he asked, going up to Pavel Petrovich, who buried his face in a cambric handkerchief. "No, not at all. On the contrary, I am much better." "You shouldn't have been in such a hurry to move to the sofa. Where are you going?" added Nikolai Petrovich, turning towards Fenichka, but she had already closed the door behind her. "I was bringing my young hero in to show you. He has been crying for his uncle." "Why did she carry him off?